Long ball number one before Christmas. Some MLS fan bases got a present, including Atlanta United. They got their new head coach, Ronny Deila. We went over this and I still messed it up.
You did.
Ronny Deila
Ronny
hired as
Deila.
Atlanta's new head coach.
Yes, Ronny Deila, MLS Cup champion Ronny Deila while he was at NYCFC. Famously stripped to his skivvies after that title in Portland. I was there on the scene. It was quite a show. The NYCFC fans who made the trip all the way out west really enjoyed it. We'll see if Atlanta United will get a chance to see Ronny Deila and his skivvies. This is a very good hire. Let's just say that. Now, he left MLS and NYCFC, took a couple of jobs in Belgium. I think Standard Liège and Club Brugge, which are two of the bigger clubs in Belgium, had runs there. Ended up in the UAE, I think, briefly, if I remember that correctly. And now coming back to MLS. And look, he knows the league. He doesn't need to have his hand held as he navigates what this league is all about. Atlanta has, we talked about this last week, they have the most GAM available going into the new season to spend on their roster. Or they
Is
did.
Deila a guy you trust with GAM?
Well, he's not going to be the one making the moves. He's just going to be the one organizing the team on the field. But I think he'll obviously be in those conversations with Chris Henderson and Garth Lagerwey, and they will find the pieces to make it work. And again, I don't know that you could do any better than this if you're Atlanta United. It's an attractive job because there's a big fan base. There's a chance to manage in front of sometimes 70,000 people, most of the time 45,000, 50,000 people. That's pretty huge by MLS standards. You've got an owner who is committed to winning, which is obviously a big deal in Major League Soccer, although parity changes the dynamic a little bit. They've tried the big name, right? They went out and they got Frank de Boer. That did not work. So here, with Garth Lagerwey getting his first chance to bring in somebody and set them up for success, Ronny Deila, with a track record in the league, he's going to come in, and I think they're going to be very good next season. I know people talking about, hey, they might be worth an MLS Cup winners bet if you were paying attention.
Wow, that would be quite something. A note that I saw in the press release about this was Garth Lagerwey said he'd never hired his own coach before. He always worked with an inherited coach. So I thought that was pretty interesting for someone who's worked in the league for 18 years or so. I'm sure it has to do with the stability at the places he's been before, but I thought that was an interesting note.
Well, that's fascinating because I think everybody who knows Garth, and obviously saw what he did in Seattle, thinks of him, and Salt Lake, by the way, thinks of him as one of the smartest guys in the league, one of the best builders of a team in MLS. It's why Atlanta gave him the job he's got now. But that is interesting because you'll remember the Jason Kreis championship team that RSL had, but he was not the general manager at the time that Jason Kreis was hired. And then he went to Seattle, and they had Siggy Schmidt, and before Garth Lagerwey arrived, Brian Schmetzer had stepped in when Siggy was fired in 2016. Of course, Brian won an MLS Cup title that year, so there was no way you were going to fire Brian Schmetzer. And so Garth, as you said, has had, and then obviously driving in Atlanta with Gonzalo Pineda, Rob Valentino takes over, but that's an interim situation, not a choice that Garth made. And now here it is. This will be interesting to see whether Garth Lagerwey picks coaches as well as he picks players.
So Ronny Deila locked in and dialed in Atlanta. Exciting for them, but surprisingly, I guess more surprising is how many jobs are still open, and we're just a week away from the end of the calendar year. You'd think that this is, getting ready for, preseason prep and roster building and all that, but jobs still open as far as head coaches. Philadelphia, Toronto, NYCFC, and Vancouver still do not have head coaches, and we're 2 days away from Christmas.
Yeah, I don't know that it's a dire situation not to have a manager in place yet. I will say that we are probably a month, maybe 5 weeks away from the opening of camps for some of these teams to get ready for the new season. The season kicks off the end of February. None of these teams are involved in Champions Cup. I mean, obviously they were. They probably wouldn't have fired their coaches, so they don't have that to worry about. But they are thinking about next season. In every case, you've got a GM whose job is kind of on the line too. I think Ernst Tanner is pretty well established in Philadelphia, but this is going to be a measure of whether or not his understanding of the league and his ability to navigate things forward for the Philadelphia Union is still worth following, right? If Ernst Tanner says Jim Curtin, who had so much success in Philadelphia, is no longer the guy, well, then you're going to be judging Ernst Tanner on the guy they do hire. Obviously, Toronto's just been messy and chaotic, and it's one of those situations where, is this a big job? Is it a job people really want? It is a good football market. They've had success in the past, but this is not necessarily a team that you think of as well run. So if you're a coach, are you running to get that job? Are you excited about coaching Toronto FC after what happened with John Herdman? Jason Hernandez is the GM there, so a lot of that focus will be on him, although I think it goes a little bit higher up the corporate ladder in terms of that decision. NYCFC, I mean, yeah, what is that? I mean, they're building into their new stadium era, right? They want to try to set a tone as they get ready to open their stadium, hopefully in a couple years. And so you got to get that one right. And then Vancouver. Vancouver is such a weird job because Vanni Sartini did excellent work, but now we know that team is up for sale. And is there going to be an ownership change sooner rather than later? How does that dictate who you hire? Are you just picking whoever's there and cheap if you're the current owners and you know you're going to be selling that team in the near future to obviously make it so that the new owner can come and clear the decks and start fresh? Those are interesting elements as these teams look for head coaches.
I wonder if there's any concern in the Vancouver fan base. They don't have a coach. The team is going up for sale. Do you think that there's reason to be nervous that, with cities jockeying for positions for MLS franchises and whatnot, do you think there's reason to be a little bit nervous if you're up in the Pacific Northwest of Canada?
Yeah, absolutely there is. Now, in the aftermath of the reporting about the team being put up for sale, there was lots of, well, there's no real reason to believe they might be relocated. But if you don't have an obvious local ownership group, right, and this all depends on how firm MLS is on whether or not Vancouver needs to stay in Vancouver, whether the Whitecaps have to be there. I also think it's a little bit, troubling that a team with that sort of legacy, because of course their name is the same name as the NASL team from Vancouver, so there's that that shared sort of Pacific Northwest history. They got that with the Sounders. They play that rivalry cup every season with them and the Quakes and the Timbers. I think. I mean, obviously they have a Cascadia Cup, but there's also some other things that work there. I don't know. This is a team that always kind of felt like it wasn't completely cooked, right? They play in that building, BC Place. They don't own it. It's a city facility. It's indoors. It's on turf. There's always been this thing of like, okay, how really in this are the Vancouver Whitecaps? So they've made some nice runs in the playoffs, but they've never really been an MLS Cup contender. And so I do think you have to wonder if relocation is potentially on the table. Haven't heard anything specific about that, but it's not impossible the way that this league is run. It would be a crime. It would be sad. I would hate every bit of it if the Whitecaps were stripped from Vancouver, but we have to consider the possibility.
Hopefully there's no grisly future for Vancouver fans here.
No, I'm not allowing that. No. Judge Jason says no, straight to the poke for you or whatever. That's terrible.
Doing some gavel banging on that one.
That's terrible. Did you just reference the NBA and like pour salt in Vancouver basketball fan wounds here? Is that what you? I don't know if our crossover is very firm with former Vancouver Grizzly fans, but sure.
There was a touch of that. Let's move on. Long